Hello and welcome to another Tekla Structures video. In this video, we'll be focusing on the floor layout tool, specifically for the Precasters. When used correctly and understood fully, the floor layout tool can be an excellent aid in productivity and efficiency gains. Tekla User Assistance defines the tool as the following. Floor layout creates floors built of precast, filigree, and hollow core slabs. The floors may contain several layers such as precast slabs, insulation, and a cast-in-place topping. Floor layout is the most useful for non-rectangular floors that contain one or more openings that split slabs into many pieces, and when slab widths are not constant on the whole floor area, you can modify the floors using direct modification. The best objects for utilizing the floor tool are slabs, insulation, and cast-in-place topping. If at any point during this tutorial you get stuck or want to learn more about the tool, feel free to pause the video and visit the TUA link shown at the bottom of your screen. Let's jump into the model. Alright, here we are back in the Tekla Structures model. Let's start by modeling in a floor bay. So let's come over here to our applications and components and let's type in floor. You're going to want to select the blue floor layout icon. And now we're just basically going to select the corners of our floor slab. So I'm just going to select these grid intersections. Now when you're coming to the end here, you have one of two options. You can either middle mouse to finish the command, or you can simply click on the very same point that you started with, as shown there. Now your very first two clicks are important because they dictate the span direction. So you'll notice in those last two examples, my first two selections were on the x-axis. Now if I select my first 2 points on the y-axis, you'll notice that the planks or the double T's span vertically. You also notice that with the select components selection filter on, it's going to highlight over your entire bay, and it's going to treat these just like any other component in Tekla Structures. So if we double click on one of the bays, it's going to bring up the floor layout dialog box. Now basically what we're going to do is we're going to kind of walk through each of these tabs and some of these boxes to kind of give you a better understanding of what exactly is going on here. So you can think of the layer tab as your first step here in building your floor system, whatever that may be, if you have insulation, cast in place, things of that nature. So you can simply click this plus icon to add layers, and you can click the red X icon to delete layers out. So what we're going to do right now is we can just basically add in one. We'll just call it cast in place. We'll make our like a 3-inch topping slab here. You can select the ... to change the material type. We're going to say 3000 psi. And if we press modify, you'll notice that the topping went below. That's because the cast in place is underneath the layer 1. So if we bring it above with the up arrow and then press modify, you'll notice it goes on top. But you'll see it's kind of broken up into these individual slabs, which we don't want, because right now you'll notice it's called precast. So we want to change that to cast in place. And instead of creating the layer as a beam part, we're going to create it as one big single part. You can press modify and you'll notice that now it looks much more normal. Same thing with the layer 1. Let's say we wanted to change these to hollow core. So we're going to just call this HC. We're going to call the name hollow core. And we're going to change the profile here to the deck and slabs, hollow core slabs standard. Let's just make it 10-inch plank by 4 foot wide. And we're going to change the material to 9000 psi concrete and the cast unit prefix to HC. Press modify and you'll see we have our hollow core slabs. That's basically everything there is to know about the layer tab. You can mess around with some of the rotations and whatnot, but for most purposes, for precast applications, you're going to want to leave this to top. And let's go on to the general tab. So general tab is where you're going to dictate your gaps, your depth position, and you're going to dictate which side you are lining up your direction as far as which side the filler wants to go to. So let's start out just at the top here. The default part width, you have a couple options. You can set the max part width or the max number of parts, or the number of parts that you're trying to shoot for if you had some kind of parametric profile that you wanted to separate into individual parts. But for the hollow core and double T application, it's best to leave this one blank, so that way Tekla does not try to override or mess with our profile, how it's set up. Next we have the default gap width. Just to make things maybe a little easier, I'm going to hide away, or delete rather, this cast in place topping and go back to the general tab. We can control the gaps in between the solid slabs, or in between the hollow core slabs, sorry. And you also have an option here for apply the same gap for everywhere, or you can say have 0 gap at the first and last slab. So by default, I leave it to that, just to show everyone exactly what it does. If we press 6 and press modify, now there's a big 6-inch gap between all of our slabs. You could set this to 0 if you so please, or maybe a more common practice is to give your erection guys a little bit of tolerance, so about 1/8 of an inch or so in between each of those. Now another item that we have control over is the depth position of these slabs. You'll see our pick points right now are at the top of the slabs, and the part is extruding downward in the negative Z. That's because of this depth position that we have selected here. So if we were to change this, we can change it to a couple different options. We can change it here, and now it's going to be at the middle of the piece, or we can change it to here, and now the part's going to be positive Z. You also have the ability to do an offset here. So let's say that we selected this option to show it going down, and let's say we knew the top of floor was going to be negative 12 or 12 feet in the air. So we're going to do this negative 12 feet and press modify. And now our slab, our top of slab is at positive 12 feet up, but negative to get it to go in that direction. So that's how you would do something like this. If you knew some of your floor heights, you could preset that within the component here. The last option here is the lineup direction. So if I go to a plan view, and I'm just going to turn on my direct modification, which it is on, I'm going to drag this bottom line here. I'm just going to make it so that we can see a filler there. And basically, right now we have a full piece here, and then we have a filler piece here on the bottom. And now what I'm going to do is, just by changing the options here and selecting on our slabs and pressing modify, you'll see that that filler now kicks up to the top. So this is a very quick and easy way to change where you want that filler piece. If you just happen to have one filler piece, that's a quick and easy way to change where you want it to line up with and where you want that extra filler space to go. If we undo that, the next tab is the Advanced tab. This is where we get into some of the nitty-gritty as far as the angles, how you want to handle angles, how you want to handle some of the minimum widths, minimum lengths, minimum distance left if you have a cutout or opening, and then minimum distances if you have another opening, but so that way you don't leave, like a small little sliver or finger of plank sticking out. You could set all those values in this location. So to kind of showcase this, what we can do is we can grab one of our pick points here on the ends, and we can just drag it out so that way we have an angle. Maybe do it on both sides to showcase. So you have the end angle and start angle based on however your pick points are at. But you'll see right now this setting just allows the slabs to be cut on an angle, and some precasters may not like that. So we have the ability to set here a minimum end angle, and that way every piece can actually be square cut. So if we just set some values in there and press modify, you'll notice that now it's basically at that minimum start angle degree. It's going to cut it back, and you're going to have a bunch of slabs that incrementally increase to make up that angle. Same thing on both ends. So this is a very nice, quick and easy way that you can turn that either on or off based on your plant's abilities and processes. Next, we're going to go to the default offset. So if I undo some of those angles, and we're going to set some pretty big offsets here just so we can see what's going on. So if I do 12 inches on each side, select my bay and modify, you notice that the planks kicked in. Likewise, we can set this value to be negative. So if I did -6 and -6, press modify, they kick out. This can be very useful if you're modeling off, if you're modeling like the inside of walls and you have a bearing wall on grids 3 and 4, something you can model to the insides of your walls, and then just change this to be your bearing distance. So maybe it's -6 or -3.5 or whatever bearing distances you have here. You can set that right in your component. Likewise, on the non-bearing ends or the lap ends, you can set that as well. You can set some gaps there for erection gaps, typically, you know, half of an inch or 1 inch, but just to maybe exaggerate this so we can all see, we'll just type in some larger numbers here. Oops, 18 inches and 18 inches. So you see now we got a nice 18-inch gap there and a nice 18-inch gap there. And this is for when you have two planks coming together here. So we can show this by coming to our contextual toolbar, and we can add in a break line. We'll just add in a break line across the whole thing just to show it. Middle mouse. Basically what we've done there is we've turned these into individual slabs going across here. And now with that command, if I go back to the default offsets, right now it's set to not a very big gap there, but if I make it a big gap just so that we can see, and press modify, you'll notice now we've got a nice big 12-inch gap there. So this is also nice if you just want to model in one huge bay and then just cut at all of your bearing walls that you have, and then you can set this gap distance in between, so that way you have your nice gap for erection tolerances and you're on your way. Next is the detailing tab here. This is where we can preload in some custom components that we can apply to our slabs, so that way we don't have to model the slabs, then select the components, then model in the components, and then go to the next component, model in that component. This kind of speeds up the whole process. You can essentially load in these components, so as you're modeling, the components are automatically dropping in. I just have a couple here just to show the premise here. I've dropped in some lifting loop anchors and then some hollow core strands, and over here you select the attribute that's within this component. So if I come here and press modify, this will take a second. It's basically going to reinforce all of this bay, and then it's also going to drop in those lifting anchors into each of the pieces. So if we rotate this over, you'll see all the pieces have the lifting loops, and then if I make my view transparent, you also see that there's now strands in there as well. So this is a very powerful tool that if you have multiple bays with maybe a couple different designs, you can save those designs away in here and then preload them in, and then just modify as you're going along. The next is the user-defined tab. This is important for those that are using UDAs on the most likely the back end for reporting or the drawings, or maybe their ERP system or something is linked with some user-defined attributes. This is a nice and easy way that you can use the component to write out UDAs to each of the individual pieces for an entire component with just one setting here. So we can just type in some text here, and I'll just press modify, and now it'll go through and apply those three UDAs that I set to each of these pieces individually. So if I just click on one of these pieces and I go to user defined attributes, you'll notice that those are now written there. So this is a very powerful tool that you can use to really speed up your workflow and processes, especially if you have, you know, hundreds and hundreds of these planks and you want to write out specific attributes to certain bays. So that's basically it when it comes to the dialog box. Now we're going to dive into the toolbar here, to the contextual toolbar. Now in order to get this toolbar to pop up, it's very important that you have your direct modification turned on, and then your select components selection filter on. So you'll just single click on your bay, and you'll notice this little tool ribbon will come up. I have mine pinned up here, so if you don't have yours pinned, likely it'll be right by your mouse like this. And basically we're just going to step through each of these options here. So I'm going to move mine back up here so it's out of the way and pin it up there. So we're going to start with this add new polygonal opening. So basically you come here, this is exactly how it sounds. You can click any kind of polygon shape that you want, and then middle mouse, and it'll go through and cut in the opening. And what I'm going to do to make our lives a little bit easier here is I'm going to turn off some of these detailing components just while showcasing these tools for speed purposes. So turn those off. And now these openings, if you select on your bay here, these openings are fully adjustable with these pick points. You can add in new points by coming to the mid sections here. It's a very nice, very easy to use tool. The next tool over is the rectangular opening. So just how it sounds, you're going to come in and cut in rectangular opening. Pretty self-explanatory. Okay, next tool we have is the add break line, which we kind of saw a little bit, but in the beginning. But basically you just select the first point and then select the second point and then middle mouse, and it'll go through and break those, break up your slabs into basically two bays there. So these are now individual slabs. Very useful tool. Very good for modeling in. If you just wanted to model in the extents of an entire floor and then just go through and break them up at all of your bearing walls or all of your beams, etc. Very, very fast and efficient way to speed up your workflow. Next tool we have is the Modify Input Polygons on the floor layout. So this is kind of the default tool that is activated. This just lets you kind of move and shake and grab these handles around as you so please. So when you by default have the direct modification on, you select, you come to this contextual toolbar. This is the default that is automatically on. Next one is the Modify Offsets. So you'll see when I have that selected, those same outputs that I selected from the offset box are now all here. And if I just simply select on one of them, I can now change these directly from this category, or directly from this direct modification. I can just select in the box and then type in whatever measurement that I would like. So that's how you use the Modify Layout Boundaries. Next one, and probably the most powerful one, is the Modify the Part Widths. One of the first things that I'll point out is your red arrows. Your longer red arrow on the top is going to dictate your span direction. So by clicking on this and dragging, you'll see that I can very quickly and very easily change my slab direction. You can also come and place it at an angle if you so please. Snap it back. And now the next thing that we'll showcase is kind of modifying the part widths here. So by clicking on a piece and dragging it, you can click and drag it basically anywhere you want, and that piece will move to there. So if you have an opening, or if you have maybe a bearing wall underneath your plank that you're trying to hide a filler on or something, you can just pick it up and move it however you so please. Another thing that you can do is you can click directly on here, directly on the part width. You can type in a new part width, 24 inches, and then your whole floor bay will relay itself out automatically with that input that you chose. And kind of the last option that you have is you have the ability to click and drag these around, and as you click and drag, you'll notice the filler on the top changing. So as it gets so small, then it goes away and takes out the next piece, and so on. So if you're wanting to see if you have, maybe a more complex configuration around an elevator, or you got a big opening or something, you can just quickly use this tool to check out how your filler and how your run layout will be. Moving on to one of the last tools here, we have modifying the detailing component strips. So this is a way to quickly modify some of the if you had a lot of different components in here, let's say like bearing pads and your lifting loops and things of that nature, you could use this selection here to edit and change, modify, delete out. But here really quickly, I just have the lifting anchor on, so let's just say I wanted to add it to maybe one of these pieces. You click your first point, your second point, and then now we have those lifting loops just in this one piece. So you have lots of different options, whether you want to apply it to everything or whether you want to individually model them in. You have lots of flexibility with this tool. Now another item that I want to showcase here is the ability to warp. So I know that with double T's and often with parking garages, it is very common to have to warp. So let's showcase that here. You have all of the pick points here of our double T's, and if we hold Alt on our keyboard and then we click and drag this pick point up or down, you'll notice that we can warp these. So we've warped it in that orientation. We can click this one while holding Alt, go up. So you can see you can very quickly and very easily grab these pick points while holding Alt and warp your slab. Similarly, you can hold Alt and draw a window over them and do a move special linear. You can move them in your z-axis to say 24 inches. So you can, whichever is easier for you, whether holding Alt and clicking and dragging or holding Alt and creating a window over, you can very easily warp your slab, whether it's hollow core or double T's or just cast in place topping. Any of those slab profiles can be warped and those handles can be modified. I think that's going to wrap it up for the floor tool. I hope you guys learned a thing or two, and I hope you guys enjoyed the presentation. Thank you for watching.